something. Hi, friends. My name is Sarah, and I'm new here, so be kind. Today, I'm going to talk about choice. And the reason I want to talk about choice, is because of something that the now gone mayor of New York City, which is very close to where I live and have lived for almost the entirety of my life, he said something ridiculously stupid, which he claimed had to do with choice. And it really irritated me, considering everything else that's going on, so I'm going to talk about it. Like I said, he is now out of office, and his replacement, Eric Adams, he's doing essentially everything exactly the same, so you can kind of assume that he thinks more or less exactly what Mr. Bill de Blasio, whose name is actually Warren Wilhelm Jr., who... What was interesting is apparently he had systematically, slowly gone about changing each part of his name until he became Bill de Blasio a little bit later in his life. But, okay, Bill, sure. Let's be honest, we all know what's happening in New York City right now. It's a bit of a mess. There is authoritarianism going through the roof. I mean, it's been a bit of a mess for a while, but it's kind of hit a fever pitch. Bill de Blasio, though. Bill de Blasio is a bit of a pet peeve of mine. He had been mayor for, quite frankly, long enough that I couldn't remember who the previous mayor was. I didn't bother to look it up, to be honest. Our current New York mayor, ours if I'm involved in this, but the current New York mayor is now Eric Adams, and he's roughly the same thing. But while Bill de Blasio was in office, he was responsible for a number of things, including a lot of things involving the police. He reduced penalties for a variety of different crimes. He was involved in getting body cams up. He was also involved in a defund police campaign for a while, which, as we all know, goes very well whenever it's implemented. He gets credit for instituting a universal pre-K system, which is essentially out there to take kids out of the care of their parents and into the care of the state as quickly as possible in their young lives. He's also responsible for giving illegal aliens, not real aliens, but illegal aliens, ID cards for, whatever they want to use them for in New York City, which is, I don't want to know what they want to use them for in New York City. Mr. Bill de Blasio generally has been under the union boot as much as possible. He is your typical pretty lefty, and he's just kind of irritating. But again, something that he said back in December before he was, booted, was really irritating to me. I cannot find the exact quote because as far as I remember, it's part of a nearly hour and a half long public address, and I simply cannot stand to sit through that man speaking for 90 minutes to find what is probably about 4 or 5 seconds of him speaking. That's what he did previous to our current situation. What he has done since then, I'm sure that the majority of you already know. Currently, he's been I'm not going to say many, he's been one of the people who's been very headstrong, let's put it that way, about having mandates, about, I gotta be careful about what I say, covering people's, for example, recently, he's one of the people that's become very gung-ho about certain medical mandates. He's also been involved in a number of other mandates prior to when the medical mandates became feasible, I guess you can say. He's just generally seems to be for a loss of freedom. He generally seems to be against the average working person. He seems to be for crime, and what a jerk. But let's talk about choice. This guy went out in what was approximately a 90-minute address, and he said that people had the choice to either get a certain shot, or they had the choice to go and lose their job, or not be able to enter into an establishment, or not be able to go out, or not be able to go to school. So I'm going to run on a list of definitions, which I found in Merriam-Webster, among other dictionaries. And the first one, probably the most pertinent one, is the act of choosing, which is the act of picking or deciding between two or more possibilities. Very obvious, maybe. The opportunity or the power to choose between two or more possibilities, which is the opportunity or the power to make a decision. That's getting a little more specific. Here's one. A range of things that can be chosen. Very interesting. A number and a variety of things to choose among. Or a prime cut of beef, but we're not talking about beef. I like synonyms because it helps to understand it in a greater sense. Some synonyms for choice are an alternative, an option, a selection, or my personal favorite, liberty. So you have choice as having options, basically. You have things that you can choose between in order to make a decision, whichever one is the most ideal for you personally. That would be choice, right? There's another C word, I think, though, that may be more pertinent to what Bill de Blasio had been saying. Let me think. Oh, coercion. The word is coercion. Let me define coercion for you, shall I? It is to make someone do something by using force or threats. To get something by using force or threats. Synonyms for this include impel, pressure, muscle, force. That seems a little bit more like what's going on, right? You have with Mr. Bill de Blasio and his amazing address to the people, his amazing concept of what choice is you do this or nothing. You do this or you don't have a choice. You do this or we do something negative to you. We have a negative result for you to be choosing between, which is not a choice. Generally speaking, when you're making a choice, you're deciding between things that at least have a similar sort of value to them, sort of things which are both something that is going to give you a similar result. I would argue that having the choice between losing your job and having something put into your body that you don't want there, that's not a choice. That very clearly goes into coercion. What Bill de Blasio had said was that you have this choice, and he said that we need to nudge people in the right direction, which always leads back to the question of who is deciding what the right direction is. Who is making the decision of what is right? Do you get to make that decision, or is it just what the tyrant, the person in charge, also known as Mr. Bill de Blasio, thinks is right? Because that's not necessarily the right decision. That is what Bill de Blasio wants. And it's always the authoritarians that are saying this. It's always the authoritarians that are pushing you to accept their choices, right? It's always them who wants you to do what they want, because obviously they are more correct than you are. And it's always been like that. And I mean, you can think back to certain events in the past, and it's like, well, you can either give up your religion, or you can choose to get, battered in the street. You can choose to give up your business, or we can batter you in the street. You can choose to get on this train, or we can make you no longer exist. You can choose to go into that brick building there with no windows and a chimney, or, well, we can just hasten the process out here, right? And I mean, look, it's the sort of thing that everybody's been saying it. So it's a little bit overdone. Yeah, do this, or it sort of resembles certain things that happened in the 1930s and 40s. Oh my God, we're all so sick of that story, except it's kind of getting there, okay? Do this thing. Take this thing into your body because we say so. Because we say that people who are not in the group of people who did take this are dirty, are dangerous. Where have we heard that before? And, you know, if you're in that group of people who's not doing what they want, well, you better hide. You better go into an attic, because you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Well, one of the things that came out of the situations of the Great Wars was that we had people stand trial for very nefarious things that they'd been involved in over the course of that period of time. And one of the things that came of those trials, the Nuremberg trials, was the Nuremberg Code. And the Nuremberg Code says, essentially, that you can't be forced to be an experiment. Why? Because, well, do I even have to say it? You should never have to be forced to be an experiment. There are so many laws that have been set up in the space between then and now, even, because of all of the terrible things that have happened because of, well, negligence. So these are things that are set up to try to prevent people from being able to make decisions for you that aren't good for you. It's supposed to be able to make it so that you can make good decisions for yourself. Because you're perfectly capable of making your own decisions, at least usually you are. Especially if you have good information on your side. And if you know what, even if you don't have good information on your side, if you simply don't feel right about something, I don't know why that's anybody else's business. So the Nuremberg Code is 10 rules that are supposed to be used to guide people who are doing medical experiments, and there are 10 of them. And the very, very first one states that you, or anyone, cannot be subjected to any sort of a medical treatment, any sort of experimentation by coercion. Remember the difference between choice and coercion. That's a big deal. You must not coerce someone to be your subject. The person who's involved in these trials, the person who's involved in this medication, in this medical experiment, has to know exactly what they're getting into, exactly what may happen to them if they know something may happen to them. And it's necessary to have this in order for these people to make an informed decision. And if they can't make an informed decision, that in itself is a form of coercion. So the question is the idea of non-coercion being upheld in the current status quo, and especially in the things that Mr. Bill de Blasio has ventured to state in his infinite wisdom? I'm going to say maybe not so much, because there is not an option here. There is no choice, and if there is no choice, there is coercion. So this is a coercive tactic. Mr. Bill de Blasio is engaged in coercive tactics, among others. There are many others who are involved in these tactics. I mean, up until recently, you couldn't be forced to, for example, take the chickenpox shot. If you didn't want it, you didn't get it. Like, there were, if you wanted to go to public schools, say, it may have been in the list of things that you needed to do in order to go to public schools, and, since then there have been a lot of other rules about that, but, I mean, if you just didn't want to do that, you go to a more private school, or you could get out of there, or there are so many other options to not have to be involved in this if you didn't want to take it. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, I'm just saying that if a person did not want to take these things, they could not be coerced. I'm not going to say forced exactly, but you know what? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Up until recently, you could not force somebody to do that. But right now, there is not choice. And when there is not choice, there is coercion. And we have to call it what it is. Bill de Blasio does not get away with calling something that is coercion choice, because that's a lie. And if you're lying, what are you doing? Like I said, he's not the only one who thinks that coercive techniques are the just most amazing way to get people to do what they want. Let's be honest here. But it may not be the best thing, it may not be the most desirable thing, and it may not be what a lot of people want. So we're going to call that coercion. And you need to call it coercion, and you need to know that when these people are telling you that, oh man, no, he has a choice. He has a choice between losing his job or taking this thing. And it's like, no, that's not a choice. And you need to be very direct with people about this, because words matter. Words have meaning, and people will try to manipulate you with words. They will try to make you think that things mean something they don't, and they will make you think that reality is different than it is. You need to be very cautious and very interested in using appropriate language for what you are trying to describe, for the things that you are trying to talk about, because it makes a difference. It is something that is very meaningful. So now you know the difference between choice and coercion, and you know that it seems to be that we're in a bit of a situation that involves coercion. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Don't stand for it. Do not let them get away with it. You call it out wherever you see it. Call all of your legislatures, call your local legislatures, call your town representatives, call your state representatives, call your national representatives, send them emails, send them letters, talk to anybody involved in that process, and you tell them what actually is happening, and you tell them that these are not appropriate things to be happening. You tell them that choice is not coercion, and coercion is not choice. And that where there is coercion, there cannot be choice, and where there is no choice, very bad things happen. I've met a lot of people who think that it's futile to involve yourself in any way with politics. They think that it's completely useless to call your politicians. They think that, for example, the representative from the local big city with a bunch of, let's be honest here, kind of kooky people in it, that he has a one particular way of thinking and he's not going to change on that. You know what? He very well might not. And that's, well, it's not fine, but you can't do too much about it. Except, these people care about their seats. You can tell him, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like that you're involved in this coercion. I don't like that you're involved with this lie. I don't like that you're involved with this very unfortunate set of circumstances here, and I think that you ought to stop it. And let me tell you something, I will certainly be campaigning against you next campaign cycle. Maybe it won't hit them, maybe they don't care, but at least they know. The thing, though, that I find most interesting is that there are a lot of people who are maybe not centrist exactly, but they do care about what their constituents say, and they do care about these things, and it's frightening in a way, but there are an awful lot of people who simply don't know what's going on, and they simply don't have this awareness of the world around them, or the things around them, or the fact that, it sounds silly, they don't understand that there is a difference between choice and coercion. They haven't fully processed that what they're doing, what they're involved in, might actually be something that goes against Nuremberg, for example, or that may resemble certain things of past historical awfulness. Again, I'm being very careful with the way I word things, but you know what I mean, okay? It's not that they don't care, and it's not that they don't want to be involved. It may be, maybe not. It may be that they just don't know. And you can be involved in making that better. Let them know. Maybe they don't care. Maybe it doesn't hit them. That's fine. Just let them know, because there probably will be at least one person who will hear you and say, that's probably something I need to think about. We're living in a strange time, but I wouldn't necessarily call it unprecedented. There's certain aspects of it that are unprecedented, and there are certain things about it that we haven't seen before, simply because of the fact that technology in the world around us has been rapidly changing in the past 30, 40 something years or so. So it looks different than it might have in, say, the time of Vietnam War. But it's not so different than it's ever been. There's a lot of people out there who are saying, well, I'll just move out of these places that are bad. I'll just get away from Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams and everybody else who's being outrageous right now. But I don't think that's necessarily the answer, because of the way that the United States is designed, unless we actually have a full-fledged breakup, which I honestly hope doesn't happen, we have to deal with each other. And if you simply change the concentration of extremists in an area, eventually that's going to filter down to other places anyway. So it's not the sort of thing that you can seem to outrun necessarily. I think that the thing that needs to be concentrated on here is rediscovering what America is. I think that we need to remind a lot of these legislatures, a lot of these people who are in these governmental positions, remind them that they are representatives and that their primary goal is to do what is the most reasonable and right thing for the people who they represent. I think it is right to remember that they took certain oaths when they came into office. I think that it's worth remembering that America has an awful lot of things about it that are codified into our Constitution, into our various laws, into our simple way of life. Maybe not officially on paper, maybe not officially in laws, but things that make America America. And a lot of those things have been chipped away with, and rapidly so in the last maybe about 10 years or so. But we can do what we can to try to bring back some of the the things that make America what it's supposed to be. And a lot of that is liberty, and a lot of that is understanding that we are, quite frankly, a special place. And we need to remind ourselves of that. We need to remind our peers of that. And we need to not let these things tear us apart, because the thing that is the most pertinent about America is the fact that it brings so many different people together under the umbrella of being an American. And people like Bill de Blasio and people like all of these people who are breaking all of the citizens into these terrible little infighting groups, and they're making each other literally hate each other for really grotesque reasons. That's the sort of thing that we need to stamp out quickly, because that's what's going to destroy America. That's what's going to destroy everything that makes us who we are. And we need to tell these people they can't be tyrants and they can't be dictators, because we already did this. All throughout the 20th century, we have dealt with tyrants and dictators and authoritarians and people who, quite frankly, should not have been able to wield the power that they had been able to wield. But we've seen it, and we've done it, and we've gone through it, and we need to tell them that this is it. This doesn't get to happen here. The reason that we exist is practically to make sure that this no longer happens. We are designed in a way to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. We are liberty. We are the freedom to do what is right. And we are the freedom to speak. And we are what is able to find knowledge. And people who want to take that away from you, and people who want to coerce you, and people who want to try to mess around with the things that created everything that we are, we can't let them have the power that they want to wield. So go out there and make your voice heard, and do it quickly, because we can do something. So get to it. I'll see you next time.